when I got indicted as a leader of this conspiracy because as a lawyer, I'm expected to know more. And ultimately, when I pled guilty, I pled because I should have known more. And I knew the one detail that should have given rise to more questions, and I took accountability for that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I pled. I was the government's main witness against one of the defendants. And then I served 6 months out of a year sentence. And there are different points of the talk and the story that'll hit me. Like sometimes it's leaving my kids and having to say bye to them. And sometimes it's losing my bar license. Sometimes it's feeling like I disgraced my parents. Well, okay, so for me personally, because of my story, the first thing it has done, and it continues for me, is that every time I deliver a speech, I heal just a little bit more.
Welcome to another episode of Speaking of Success. Now, it's not every day you get to introduce a guest to your podcast who has spent 6 months in a federal prison. Today, we have the remarkable Rashmi Airan with us. Rashmi is a motivational keynote speaker, leadership consultant, and former attorney whose life story is a powerful testament to resilience and the human spirit. Her journey from a high-powered attorney to a prison inmate and now to a sought-after, captivating and motivational speaker and consultant highlights the transformative power of public speaking. Rashmi's insights into leadership, embracing discomfort, breaking through limiting beliefs, and personal growth are sure to inspire and empower you. Join us as we delve into her story, uncover the profound impact of public speaking on personal and professional development, and learn how she embodies the philosophy of rise through it to overcome adversity, embrace change and volatility, and thrive. Rashmi, welcome. So good to have you here. How are you doing?
Good. I'm thrilled to be here and so great to meet you finally, Spencer.
Exactly. So I normally start these things with taking you back a little bit in time to understand your journey in public speaking. So can you share maybe with us a little bit about how it started? What was the first time you started to stand up and speak in front of others?
Well, it's actually for me, it's sort of a loaded question because although, yes, I've been professionally speaking for about 8 years, my journey into speaking, I would say, started when I was a kid. And it's interesting. I was just having this conversation yesterday with a client that the first memory that I have of public speaking is I was in high school and my parents sent me to Dale Carnegie, and I did the whatever it was, like 16-week Dale Carnegie course. And just to give you some context, I grew up an overweight, insecure, nerdy Indian girl who was not popular. I had, my self-esteem was, in the floor. My entire sense of self-worth and value and love was rooted in my achievements and, what grades I got and what awards I won. And I think it's a very typical story for first generation Americans coming from immigrant families. So I'm not the exception. And so I remember my father had gone to Dale Carnegie when he first moved here from India, actually, as he became a professional. Then he sent my mom, and it totally changed who my mom is. And to this day, my mom is like this go-getter, and really Dale Carnegie formed her. So me going to Dale Carnegie helped me not only understand what it means to speak in public, but to have the confidence to speak in public. And I realized I loved it and I was good at it. So, and I was still I still had all the insecurities, right? Because I didn't lose weight for many, many years after that. Then when I went to college, I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and I was the first female to ever run for student body president in this massive university. And in that campaign, over a period of 6 months, I gave a speech every night at a different club or sorority or fraternity house. I knocked on every single dormitory door on campus, which is 17,000 students, and essentially was giving a speech every time I knocked on a door. So my sort of foray into public speaking happened very naturally.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, as your intro shared, I went from, then I went to law school. So in law school, there is sort of an element of public speaking because you're doing trial work or appellate work. And then as a lawyer, I was doing a lot of that. When I left the law and I ended up in prison, when interestingly, I did do Toastmasters in prison. They have a Toastmasters in chapter that came to the prison I was at.
Wow,
So
I
I
didn't know that.
participated in that.
Yeah.
And then when I came out, I didn't know what I was going to do, frankly. It's really hard. And there's still a lot of stigma attached to, those that come out of the system. And I had close friends and family, as well as my attorney, say to me, you should really think about sharing your story, because the way you have resiliently handled yourself, I walked into prison with a very positive mindset, with a growth mindset. And I didn't know what the outcome was going to be in my life, but I knew that something good would come from it. I just had that faith.
Yeah.
And so that journey is a very unique one, according to my attorney. And I also had this like profound sense of accountability that I took prior to going to prison, like before I got sentenced. And so sort of all of that combined, he said, you should really start sharing. And that's really how I started speaking. From there, of course, word began to spread, and then I got a TEDx, and then it's
Continued from there.
built upon itself. Yeah.
So, wow, there's about 8 conversations in that last
Yeah.
So I'm going to take you back to the Dale Carnegie, because one of my things around speaking is, a lot of people, when we get to the workplace, we have had very little exposure to public speaking. And I think like giving a child the experience of doing something like a Dale Carnegie course or a public speaking course, I think is like one of the best things that you could do for kids, because then by the time they get to the workplace, it's actually like you already got some way down that journey. But
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know, like what your memories are from that time, but that also must have been quite an intimidating, tough thing to do in the beginning before it had its impact. So what can you
Yeah,
remember
because I was
from...
sorry, I cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say, what can you remember from those first couple of lessons?
So I remember, okay, I was a 16-year-old
Yeah.
surrounded by like young adults, essentially people in their 20s, 30s, 40s. So there was a lot of grace that was given to me. I do remember that. Have you taken Dale Carnegie? Do you know what it's about?
I know of it, but I've never taken it.
Yeah. So there is, anybody that's taken Dale Carnegie knows that there is this one point, and I forget it, which session. Now they've abbreviated the 16 courses to, I think, 12 or 10 or something like that. But at some point they do this, I don't know how to explain it. It's sort of like a assignment while you're there. And the assignment is that one by one, everyone gets up on stage and says this phrase. And the phrase is, and I'm 52 and I still remember the phrase, I know people in the ranks who will stay in the ranks. Why? Because they haven't the courage to get things done. So this is the phrase. Now, the whoever's leading the Dale Carnegie's, like the instructor or whatever, gets up and delivers these sentences to you. And it is a performance. I mean, it is like, because they haven't the courage to get things done, right? I'm a 16-year-old kid. I am not getting in front of all these people and doing this. Well,
Yeah.
What happens is you get up on stage and they make you do it over and over and over until it, but I want to feel it from you. I want to hear you from those ranks have got to hear you say it. Right. So it's like it gets drilled into you the entire time. And then what happens is from that point on, every subsequent session, you have to get up and deliver that phrase.
Yeah.
And so you end up like recognizing, because it's so nerve-wracking at the beginning and you feel like odd and weird and you're sitting in this room, but it's like the idea is you have to really feel the message that you're sharing. You can't just say words. Yeah. Right? Like you actually have to, like, what does that sentence say? What it says is, unless you have the courage and the wherewithal to get things done, you're going to stay down in the ranks and you're never going to become a leader. that's the point, right?
Yeah.
My entire message right now, my mission is so part of my soul. And so I take what I learned from Dale Carnegie and I apply it in everything that I do, because if I'm not feeling it in my core, like with a true sense of integrity, as to how I want to share myself with the world, then it comes off as inauthentic.
Yeah.
And look, there's some great speakers out there, but you can tell the difference between someone who's really dropped into their soul and is giving it from the heart versus somebody who's just delivering a speech and
Yeah.
words.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And I think like what I love about the that experience at Dale Carnegie, it reminds me a lot of, I've been learning improv comedy the last few years.
Yeah.
And there are some very similar exercises where you will be given a sentence and you're on stage and you have to say it in 8 different emotions. Or you're not allowed to say any words, but you just have to mumble, but you have to do it with emotion and power.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Yeah, it feels very silly when you first do it, but actually you
Yeah.
suddenly start to understand like, wow, I can totally change the feeling in the room, even if I'm not saying words. Like, so then when you add words on top of that, it's like, it becomes like really powerful. So it's,
Great. Like everything, like your hand gestures, your face, your eyes, like it
yeah,
all has such a meaningful impact. And then you add the words on top of it and the energy and, all of that. So yeah.
yeah. Okay, so let's like I want to get to obviously like the speaking that you started doing when you came out of prison, but maybe just share a bit of context for people because they might not know your story. What
Yeah.
happened? Yeah, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. It's a very long story, but I'll cut it short by explaining just sort of the main details, which is
Yep.
I was running my own real estate law practice in Miami, Florida. Right in 2000, I started in 2004. By 2007, I was, hustling, pounding the pavement, trying to grow my business. Contextually, my kids were 2 and 3, and my husband was a firefighter. So there was a lot of pressure, and I definitely felt that the need, right, to get clients. On top of that, just as an Indian woman, first generation with Indian parents, immigrant pressure, self expectations, there was so much pressure to achieve and to make money and to keep up with society. And of course, all the society, and Miami is no stranger, right? So living in a specific type of house, right? So there was certainly all of this warped mentality of I have to achieve in certain ways. And when I got an opportunity to meet a real estate developer, and I just, the short story is I didn't ask the questions I should have asked. He was giving buyers incentives to buy these condo units he had converted, and I didn't ask how he was doing it in more detail. I knew one detail. I assumed it was okay. He was giving buyers this benefit by saying, Spencer, if you buy my condo unit, I have a management company. Because everyone was buying as an investment property. So he said, my management company will make sure your property is rented. You don't have to worry about it for 2 years. We'll rent it. You'll get a mortgage payment you'll get a rental payment every month to pay your mortgage. So I knew the buyer was getting a benefit. I didn't ask follow-up questions. And had I asked, I would have learned that they were doing a lot of things, or maybe I would have learned, or at least it would have given rise to some questions. They were doing a lot of things outside of closing that I did not know. Ultimately, 7 years later, when I got indicted and then I went through discovery, I learned. So I worked with this guy for about a year and stopped working with him. And I got indicted, and I learned that they were giving buyers, basically they were straw buyers. So Spencer would get a check for $30,000 3 weeks after closing for for the basically for Spencer buying the unit. And essentially what was happening was the market was about to tank. The developer was trying to get out from underneath his loan, his recourse loan. He no longer cared whether he was making money. He just wanted the release from his name, right? The recourse. So he was essentially giving all of the whatever his profit was, he was giving back, and it was being divvied up between the buyer, the mortgage broker, the real estate broker, and a third party. So I didn't get I was not involved in any of that, but of course I was making money from the actual closings. And so when I got indicted as a leader of this conspiracy, because as a lawyer, I'm expected to know more. And ultimately, when I pled guilty, I pled because I should have known more. And I knew the one detail that should have given rise to more questions, and I took accountability for that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I pled. I was the government's main witness against one of the defendants, and then I served 6 months out of a year sentence.
So you end up in prison for 6 months, which is, I guess, the toughest thing that you can find yourself in.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get from that to there's Toastmaster in the prison? And, like, was
Yeah.
that like already after a while? Was it something that just, because I think it's like, for me, obviously, like I didn't even know that Toastmasters had something like that in a prison. But
Yeah.
so, can you share a bit about what was that journey like? How did you find it? What was going on at the time?
So when you're in prison, I was at a minimum security camp, thank the Lord. And so we all had jobs. Every woman in the camp has a job. There was about 480 women there, and we all had jobs. And one night, one of the women in my, I, I guess you would call them like a housing unit. I
Yeah.
saw her leaving, and we were friends. And I goes like, "Hey, so what are you up to?" Because the jobs would end at 4. Although I was a teacher, ultimately I was a teacher. I had a couple jobs, but ultimately my main job was I was a teacher in prison, and I was helping women learn math and trying to pass the GRE. But in the evenings, you could basically do after 4 o'clock whatever you wanted. You could go outside and exercise. You could watch TV. You could read. You could just hang out and talk. You could do whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
And so one night, this girl was going downstairs. I was like, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Oh, I'm going to Toastmasters." I was like, "What?" Because I hadn't heard. Of course, I know what Toastmasters is. I had never participated, and I like you was a little surprised there was a Toastmasters in prison. But how incredible is that?
Yeah.
So I went, and I think it was maybe about a month in when I was there. And I think they came once a week to the prison. So yeah, it was really phenomenal. And for me, watching the other women give speeches on all sorts of topics, learning the skills that Toastmasters teaches was pretty phenomenal and a really incredible experience. I share a lot of this on stage, but it's the process of going to prison, the experience of going to prison is such a humbling one because it, for me, put me in touch with the greater sense that we are all humans. We are all the same. We are all drops from the same ocean. And but for the grace of God, there go I. And so, these individual experiences that I kept having in prison helped me, really humbled me to recognize that wow, this is somebody who grew up in the projects in Kentucky. She's an amazing speaker, right? Like she's got this great story, and the way she shares it is so like she's so well spoken and intelligent. And I have learned about myself that I had been passing judgment on so many people in my life, and would have passed judgment on these women. And uh, being in prison really helped me understand that about myself. And
Yeah.
so I owned it, and now I try not to do that.
Yeah, and like I think the thing that struck me through this whole story about the Toastmasters there is that it's an environment where it's not the normal type of people that may go to Toastmasters, because people
Right.
go to Toastmasters for very specific reasons.
Right.
I'm super, super curious because that obviously, like, the reason that we're talking, and I want to get into the impact of being a public speaker on you, but I can't
Yeah.
help but wonder what was the impact on those other women in that Toastmasters inside the prison when they suddenly
Yeah.
developed this skill. Like, what did that give them? Did you see
It
anything?
gave them 100%. This is what it gave them. It gave them a sense of purpose. It gave them confidence. It gave them a belief in themselves that they could do something that they never otherwise would have thought they could do.
Yeah.
Because most people are so terrified of public speaking because the story we tell ourselves is, what is somebody going to say about me? Or I'm not as good as that person, or what I have to say is not important, or what if I mess up, and what if I'm not perfect? Like all of the things that we say to ourselves. And so we never try. And, fortunately for me, I was kind of pushed into it by my dad. And so I got out of that mentality pretty quickly. But these women are not women who probably ever even thought about and have never been put in a situation.
Okay.
If they were raised by parents who were drug dealers and then ended up, in a scenario where they were also in that same space, it's not like they've ever thought about giving a speech. So to be able to like digest and think about a topic and then how you're going to organize the talk and then how you're going to start the talk and then not say or like and all the things a Toastmaster teaches, but which by the way, I still do it, every now and then,
Yeah,
we're not perfect.
for sure.
So I believe it was very eye-opening for them to have the opportunity to try something they otherwise would never have tried and recognize that they can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. It's what an amazing story. I think
Yeah.
it scratches my curiosity button no end.
Yeah.
So okay, so you leave prison, your attorney says you need to start telling your story. How did that start? Did it start straight away at conferences? What was that? Because
No.
you've got to put
Yeah.
something together, and what was that like?
Honestly, I didn't know what I was doing. Okay. I had no idea what my message was. I didn't know I was supposed to identify a problem and like all the things I've learned since. I will tell you that the way it started was my attorney said this to me. I got out of prison in February 2016. And I think by like July, I sent an email to one of the professors at Columbia Law School, which is where I went to law school. And he was the chair of the criminal law section. And so I sent him an email and I said, "Hi, Professor Coffee. Uh, this is who I am. I was class of 98." And so I also gave him all these details. So when I graduated from law school at Columbia, I graduated top of my class. I was named a Kent Scholar, which is like the highest honor you can get for the best grades. And I was on like a specific law review. And I had all the accolades. And so by all accounts, I was a type of student that most kids try to be when they're at Columbia Law School. So I gave him all that detail and then said, I just got out of federal prison and this is what happened.
Yeah.
Um, if I can come and share my story with some students, if I can help even one student learn from my experience so they don't make those same mistakes and bad judgment calls, that's meaningful to me.
Yeah.
At the time, I had a lot of miles racked up on American, and my probation officer said, "You can go, but you can't spend money." So I stayed with a friend. I used miles to travel. My parents let me money so I could buy food and take the subway. And I went and I gave a talk at Columbia. From that, he then began to spread the word. So, like, then NYU called me, and at Fordham called me, then the New York City Bar Association calls me. And then along the way, I started applying for TEDx conferences. And then kind of it just became like this steamroll. Like, so people heard about me and then they would invite me. I wasn't allowed to make any honorariums or speaker fees for 3 years while I was on probation. The judge ruled that he would not let me earn fees. He said, you can get reimbursed for your costs and travel, but I don't want you making money doing this while you're on probation.
Yeah.
So I waived my speaker fee for about 300 speeches, and I gave them because I believed it's the right thing to do. And I do believe it's my mission is to help people. And I have thankfully, the universe has given me the courage to share the story. And I know that when people hear the story, they're first of all, it's relatable because we can all make a bad decision. And like just the story of overcoming adversity, we all go through something. So I've just instituted a process that I use to get over, to get through moments through truth and faith. So,
yeah. So, wow. So you've just finished 300 speeches over the course of 3 years, and now you are free to actually earn some money for this as well. Like, and I guess like there's many questions that come into my head. Like, I guess like after telling that story 300 times, you've already now got it honed pretty well.
It's interesting because I had, but I would say that over the last 12 months, and certainly over the last 4 months, what I have identified is that I've been selling myself short because I was giving like this snapshot of what happened and forgetting that the power of who I am and the change that I can create in the world is not just a snapshot, but there's so many other parts of my life and my story that are very meaningful and need to be shared. Because as giving speeches is storytelling, and I have a gazillion stories that are really impactful and relatable that I'm now starting to institute. And even the way I'm telling my prison story is very different now.
Yeah.
So, like I've shared it in one way, and I'm having a lot of fun now dismantling that and telling it a different way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think one of the people I learned a lot from is a guy called Marshall Gans. He's a lecturer at Harvard, but he's done a lot of work around story, and he always says that if to answer the question "Who am I?" it's a piece of story work, because it's everything that happened to me from the moment I was born to this
Yes,
moment right now, and it's this
exactly.
rich tapestry of many different things. So I totally, yeah,
I
totally,
love that. I'm
yeah.
gonna have to look them up. I love that because um, it is so true that like, so as a side note, I tend to do a lot of leadership consulting work for groups, and I've been in the collegiate athletic space for a long time, and C-suite will call me and say, like, as a follow-up to my keynotes.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that all that work is centered around core values.
Yeah.
And where do those core values come from? And I do a whole exercise around our life journey.
Yeah.
And so it's like from day you're born to today, what are your what are you anyway, it's a whole exercise. And then at the end of the day, we deconstruct what our core values are because of our life experiences, because
Yeah.
we are who we are because of our life experiences, good and bad,
Yeah.
and nobody has a straight line all the way up that goes to current. We all have our ups and
Yeah,
downs of
it's a messy a messy
it's
journey.
that is the purpose of humanity.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely I'll send you some links after this, but definitely
Yeah,
researching, because he helped Obama get into the White House through speech. Like
through his
he has,
storytelling.
yeah, he has this whole thing called the three nested narratives. The story,
Oh,
it's
I love that.
the story of self, the story of us, and the story of why now. And I mean, I could now direct the rest of our talk for just talking about that for the next 40 minutes, but it's yeah, he's done some amazing work on values, story, identity, mobilizing, because he basically got 200 Democrats across 50 different storytelling camps all across America. And basically it was people from 400 different types of backgrounds, religions, race, and they just got them talking to figure out what's the shared values, because it doesn't matter then. Wait, so it was honestly, yeah, I could wax lyrical
So
about that for
cool.
a long time, but
So cool. I'm gonna have to go look that up. Yeah.
yeah. So okay, so you've done the 300 speeches. That's already a ton of speaking and being very vulnerable and telling your story. So at that point, like, what kind of impact had you seen in terms of good things that came from that process? What were the benefits of doing that amount of speaking
So I would, for me or for the audience?
for you?
Oh, for
This
me.
is, yeah, this is like, going back to this idea of what's the benefits somebody listening when
Yeah.
you make yourself vulnerable and you do public speaking, what's the kind of
Yeah.
superpowers that it can give you?
Well, okay. So for me personally, because of my story, the first thing it has done, and it continues for me, is that every time I deliver a speech, I heal just a little bit more. Because every time I give my speech, I'm right back where I was. I relive it, and it's hard. And sometimes, and there are different points of the talk and the story that'll hit me. Like sometimes it's leaving my kids and having to say bye to them, and sometimes it's losing my bar license. Or sometimes it's feeling like I disgraced my parents. But the whole common root of all it is, it's all very personal things. Yes, I lost all my money. Yes, I did lose my bar license, right? But like the greater pain came from, what would people say about me? What are my parents, what will happen to my parents? What will my kids do? Like, and so, but every time I share it, I feel like I heal a little bit more. And what happens is, so I always open it up to Q&A at the end because people always have all these questions.
Yeah.
Um, and then after, of course, many times people want to come and also talk to me. And so one of the things that I get told a lot, whether it's, through a written testimonial or email or in person, is you're so inspiring. how can you stand up there, you know, looking totally happy and normal, but you went through this life-changing, horrible experience? Like, how do you do that? Which is actually part of the reason why now I talk about Rise Through It, which is my new positioning,
Yeah.
which is how I go through that, which is what is the process. But I tell people, like, there is no secret sauce. Like, you just have to accept it and own it and acknowledge what is in front of you, the truth. And so I just keep doing that over and over. The other thing that's happened is, you know, I started speaking in 2016, end of 2016. Now we're in 2024, 8 years later. And I have in the last few years received emails from people that heard me speak in 2016, 2017, 2018. And, you know, the emails will say something like, you gave a speech at a conference I was at in 2017, and your story has stayed with me. And today I was supposed to go do something, or I was asked to do something, and I remembered your story and I knew not to do it. Or like somebody else said, I remembered how you got through your situation, and I'm going through something, whatever it is. You know, this person said, I was just diagnosed with cancer, but I know I'm going to be, I know I can get through this. And I just remembered your story. So like each time I get one of these emails that I have impacted somebody, and 5 years later, they remember it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the power of being a speaker. Is it feels so wonderful that you can impact somebody's life. So I used to define myself by, like I said, all my accolades, what schools I got into, what my grades were. Later on, it was how much money I was making, what car I was driving, all that stuff. I've never been a person shoe girl, so that was never my thing, but um and not unreasonable, you know. But now I define myself, like, success to me looks different. Today it's how many people can I inspire and touch today. That's it.
Yeah. And I think like what I hear in that is when you think about at the beginning, like you're going to climb up on a stage and be very vulnerable and tell that story. But eventually, that's what makes the emotional connection to the person in the audience. That's why they can put themselves in your shoes and
Yeah.
feel what you're feeling in that moment. And that's why they'll remember it for such a long time. So I think it's such a great message that regardless of what your journey is and what your message is, whatever makes you feel vulnerable on stage actually can be a really powerful thing to do, even though it feels scary to do it. So I think
Well,
it's a
I
powerful message.
thank you. I say that Brene Brown gives me the courage, or at least spark the courage, and I live in this space now all the time.
Yeah,
And it's not easy, but I just force myself to do it every day because I know that I'm helping people and myself through the process.
yeah,
And I was not raised like this. You know, I was raised to not ask questions, that I had to know it all, and somehow attorneys are supposed to know it all. So, and I'm the eldest of three daughters, so everyone came to me, and I'm the eldest of all of the cousins on my side of the family. So, not just of my sisters, but like everybody I'm the oldest of. So, I was always like, I was supposed to know everything. So, I never felt like I could admit that I didn't understand, or I didn't
yeah,
know, or can someone help me? Because I didn't want to be vulnerable, because I thought that was weak. And now I recognize, gosh, there's power in being vulnerable, and so much strength that I have gained internally, emotionally, is because I live in this space.
yeah, yeah. And it helps both you and the people that you tell the story.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, I mean, imagining somebody listening to this that is at the beginning of their career, or they've just decided, I need to get over my fear of public speaking, or I want to start. What
Yeah.
advice would you give to somebody that's a beginner?
So it depends on what the intention is, right? Like, I think if you are somebody, I think there's like three categories. One is somebody like me who's a professional speaker who has a message on their heart that I want to impact the world with, because I know it's important and I can change people's lives. Um, if that's where you're at, then like my recommendation is you partner with, or you find the people, the best people in the industry to support you to get to where you want to get to, which is crafting the right keynote, figuring out how to market yourself, um, aligning yourself with people that support you, you know, and if anyone wants to talk to me about what I think is the right way to do that, I'm happy to have that conversation. The second bucket would be, I think, corporate leaders or corporate professionals, let's say professionals, whether it's corporate or nonprofit, that are giving, whether they're leading an executive team meeting of 5 people or 4 people, or a nonprofit profit leader who gets called to give lots of speeches in the community, right? So there are people that don't make public speaking their career, like me,
Yep.
but are out there speaking. This obviously includes politicians. So in that bucket, again, I think that there are tools and entities available to help fine tune how to be a better speaker. And we talked about storytelling. There's a lot of it that I think focuses on how to tell the story in a way that's impacting your audience and influencing them and organizing it and like all the things. The third bucket are people that might not have any of those roles, but want to get out there every now and then, or just have the comfort level of being at a party and walking up to a group of people and starting a conversation. Because in at a very granular level, that's still public speaking. You're
Yep.
speaking in a public
100%.
setting to more than one person. That's public speaking.
Yeah.
And so for those people, like I think Dale Carnegie is a great option. I think reading the right books, Toastmasters, being in Rotary, there are local opportunities where you can get involved, become a leader, and that sort of forces you to do some speaking. Or join some of these, organizations outside of Toastmasters. I mentioned Impact 11 earlier. There are entities that still will help you learn and perfect and grow those skills. And you never know. You might decide you want to be a public speaker. You don't know if you have a story in your heart that you didn't realize was there. So
yeah, all three are really great advice, and I love the addition of the personal benefit of, if you want to go be in a party or a room full of people that you don't know. Because for me, 100%, that's what I saw as like almost, I call it a side benefit, but like
yeah,
the more that I did public speaking, the more, because as you know, like the second you climb off that stage, you're going to have 58 different conversations by the time you get to the door. And yeah,
right,
and now I see the difference between the Spencer today versus the Spencer 20 years ago. Like when you
right,
walk into a room, and
yeah,
I'm very comfortable now at choosing anybody in that room, going up, introducing myself, having a conversation. And so
right.
I think, yeah, sometimes the benefits to your personal life of getting good at this skill is something people overlook.
So I have 2 children. I have a daughter who's 18 and a son who's 19.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've watched both separately have these different trajectories. They obviously know what I do. I mean, I think if they were really forced to, they could probably give my speech at this, or at least my old speech at this point, because they heard it so many times. They
Yeah.
want to roll their eyes probably at this point. But, I feel like uh, there are opportunities when our children are going through school, and I do think schools these days are doing a better job at
Yeah.
creating, the requirement of group projects and presentations, and each person in the group has to deliver part of the presentation. And I know that I helped my daughter practice a lot for some of these presentations because she
Yeah.
was really nervous. She was like, I don't know how you do it, Mom. This is so scary, So I do, my son is the exact opposite. He's like, I got it, so there of course, our children are always going to be very different. And I think the sooner we can expose them, and thank God schools today are, by junior high school, kids are giving group presentations, which is, I
Yeah.
think, a very positive
Yeah.
change from when I was in high school, because there wasn't much of that. I mean, obviously, when I got to college, it changed, and law school, but it was very different when I was in middle school and high school.
Yeah.
So I, I, yeah, I think I forgot the question, but
That's okay, don't worry. No, I was going to say it's the same for me. I don't think I ever did any presenting at all at school, and it was only when I got to university that I did. But
yeah,
and yeah, and I agree, schools are a lot better at it now. I mean, I always go back to, if you go back, I'm specifically looking at the UK here, but like if you go back far enough in time, they used to have debate and rhetoric and communication
yes,
as like a huge part of the curriculum, because it was considered like, how could you possibly go into society if you don't have this skill? So I think as much
Right.
as, yeah, schools have come a long way, but I still think they could go further. But
By
that's
the way, I did forget to say that in high school, I was on the debate team. I spent every weekend in debate tournaments. So I guess there was public speaking going on there too.
yeah, definitely.
Kind of forgot that. Yeah, I talked about Dale Carnegie, but I forgot that I was on debate.
On the debate as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so let's wrap it up with, where can people find you? Where can
Yeah.
they listen to more of your stuff? Where
Yeah.
should they go?
So, I mean, you can find me on YouTube. You can just Google my name, Rashmi Airan. It's Rashmi. Last name Airan, Airan. Feel free to email me. It's rashmi@rashmiairan.com. My website is also rashmiairan.com. In full disclosure, we are in the middle of July. It is fully under reconstruction right now, but by August 2024, it should be up and going,
Yeah,
along with my new speaker reel. So, and I'm obviously on LinkedIn under Rashmi Airan and Instagram under Rashmi Airan. So lots of places people can find me. Would love if you guys follow me.
fantastic. And I'll make sure I put links to all of those as the show
Great.
notes below the video. So
Awesome.
yeah, all that remains is to say thank you so much for sharing.
Love being here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Spencer. It was lovely.
You're
I
welcome.
just love having these conversations because
Yeah.
it helps you pop in.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Good luck on your book.